Welcome to the Wetlands interview. I'm Tatiana Lobato, and today I will interview Marinus Otte. Dr. Marinus Otte is a professor at North Dakota State University in Fargo, U.S., and has specialized in wetlands research and education for more than 30 years, with a strong focus on pollution and phytoremediation. His research, teaching, and outreach on water and wetlands has involved projects around the world, most recently in Mexico as a Fulbright specialist. He is a lifetime member of the Society of Wetland Scientists and has been the editor-in-chief of the scientific journals like Wetlands and International Journal in Phytoremediation. He published about 100 peer-reviewed scientific articles and contributed to many conferences worldwide. Welcome, Marinus. Thank you for joining us in the Wetlands interview.
Well, thank you, Tatiana, for having me. It's been a pleasure, working with you and getting to know you better over the past 2 years or so. And I hope to continue our collaboration, and this is also part of it. So I'm excited.
Of course. At first, to start, we are interested to know about how everything started and how everything began in your wetland life. So could you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you become interested in biology and then to become a wetland scientist?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I grew up in the Netherlands, near Amsterdam. And I was always interested in nature, and in my mind I wanted to do something with biology. And then I had a teacher, first in elementary school. His name was Jan Vlietstra. And he was an exceptional teacher. And one of the things he did was, I remember one summer, he said, you know what, if you're interested, we're going to get up at 4 in the morning and we're going to get on our bicycles and we'll go into this dune reserve near our home, which was about 4 kilometers away. And we'll go look at the sunrise and birds nesting. This was in the spring. And it was an exceptional experience. And it was Jan Vlietstra then who stimulated me to think more about what I wanted to do. And what then happened is he got certified to teach at the high school, and I happened to go to that high school, and so had him again as my teacher in high school for at least 3 different subjects, for chemistry, for biology, and for physics. And he was one of those people that made me really enthusiastic about wanting to be a biologist. And so from there on, I continued and obtained my degrees at the Free University in Amsterdam, Vrije Universiteit, and got my master's and my PhD. So that started it all.
And why you moved to Fargo in North Dakota, and how was this experience in your life?
Well, after I got my degrees in Amsterdam, I was lucky enough to get a postdoc with Jim Morris, who is a coastal salt marsh researcher from South Carolina. He's retired now, but I worked with Jim for 2 years and gained more experience. Then I moved to Ireland, where I worked and lived for 14 years. And then at some point it was time to go somewhere else. Ireland, it rains too much and there's too many clouds, and it made me depressed. And there were other reasons as well. It was just time to move. And of all the jobs that offered me a position, North Dakota State University gave me or offered a package that I thought was very, very good to move here. And the idea that I could then also maybe own a bit of land where I could live, which is an affordable place here, that helped. In the winters, you just have to deal with them. So, yeah.
Cool, very interesting.
Yeah.
We know that you are the editor-in-chief of the journal Wetlands
Right.
for at least a decade, and I am very interested in know how did you become the editor-in-chief of this journal, and how it was this experience from the past 10 years, how you changed your mind and your evolution like an editor in this time.
Right. Well, so first of all, I moved to this region and then learned that there are several colleagues around this area that I knew through the Society of Wetland Scientists, and they had heard that I was moving here. One of those people is Glenn Guntensbergen, who lives and works, he's retired now, but he works near Duluth. And again, we knew each other through the SWS. And in, I think, 2012, he became a president of the society. And they had been looking for an editor to take on that position. And Glenn contacted me and said, I think you would be good at doing that. And I hadn't really thought about it. I was an associate editor for other journals, but I hadn't thought of being the editor-in-chief of Wetlands. And I thought, well, okay, maybe this is something I can do. And as I started thinking about it, it grew on me. And long story short, they offered me that position. What has changed, or what I've learned over the past 10 years, I got a much better understanding of how not just the world of publishing works, but how we are competing with other journals in similar areas. And people have a choice, particularly in wetland science. They can go to so many different journals that do something with water. And so you need to make it attractive to actually publish in wetlands to grow the journal. And that has been interesting. In the meantime, the world has been changing to be more online. Other players have come in. The United States was the most important wetlands research country, if I can call it that. There are countries in Europe as well, but America really did a lot of work on wetlands because of the way, well, it's the Clean Water Act really that did that. But recently that has changed. There, a lot of papers now still come from China. That suddenly grew. And then Latin America, as you know, we really see an increase there. And so I need to constantly think about different ways of how to grow the journal further, and it's not easy.
Thanks for mentioning China, because it is make a connection with my next question.
Okay, yeah.
That we know that you are doing a lot of your work in China with Chinese collaborators and also in Taiwan.
Yeah.
How was this experience in the other side of the world, and how hard is to collaborate with people that has a different cultural background and
Sure.
scientific experience?
Well, so first of all, this started before I was editor-in-chief of Wetlands. I also, for a few years, was the chair, president, whatever you want to call it, of the then international chapter. And I already knew of several colleagues there because I had contacted them at the time to create an Asia chapter. I started that, if you will. They did the work, but I wrote to members that you can have your own chapter. Wai Ta Fang in Taiwan was one of the people that was involved in that and created the Asia chapter. And Sam Lau was involved in that as well. Both are now also associate editors of the journal ever since I started, because I invited them for that. When I became editor-in-chief, Wai Ta Fang then invited me to travel with colleagues, Rob McGuinness and Ben LePage, to Taiwan as part of our collaboration in that country. Taiwan has been very good in inviting colleagues over to think about how they can protect their wetlands better and how to develop wetland research. And so I went to Taiwan. And then through that, and other colleagues, I think it was in fact Bin He Hu, who is also an associate editor, He has connections with people in particularly northeast China. And so first I was invited to Taiwan by Wei Tafeng, and then to come to Changchun. First actually Beijing Normal University, a number of colleagues there, and then to Changchun. And ever since I have been collaborating with people there. I've done research in both Taiwan and particularly northeast China. And China has intrigued me. It is certainly a very different culture. Taiwan, of course, I don't want to go into politics there, but Taiwan is a bit different because you don't need visa. You can just fly there and do work there. Mainland China, you need visa. It's a bit more difficult. You need to be invited. But all in all, regardless, it has been incredible to work with them. And in China, particularly early on, Professor Jiang Ming, and I have had discussions about how to restore wetlands and how to protect wetlands. And I would like to believe that some of the things I said have helped create a law that went into that was enacted just this year, just maybe 2 months ago. And that is the most far-reaching wetland protection law in the world. It is pretty amazing what they're doing. They are doing it better than, for instance, the United States with the Clean Water Act, which was never really intended to protect wetlands, it was to protect water quality. But they have a law now pertaining to wetlands. And one of the things to mention that maybe I helped a bit with, one of the questions was, how do we deal with rice paddies? Because under if you follow the American definition and the Ramsar definition particularly, rice paddies are wetlands. And I made a strong point for not doing that because industrial scale rice farming is no different from growing corn. It just has water on the surface. That doesn't make it a wetland. And so they, in their law, they protect all wetlands, but specifically excluding rice paddies and aquaculture, coastal fish farming, things like that. So I would like to think that I've contributed a little bit to that discussion. Yeah.
Of course, you did. I have no doubt about it. And that's a very interesting, this international experiences and the international exchange between individuals and countries and institutions. In that way, what do you think that the Society of Wetland Scientists needs to become more international and to promote much more international interactions among members?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem, and that's not specific to SWS, but if you are in one culture and you want to reach out to another culture, you cannot do that from your office chair. You need to go there and learn about that culture and understand what needs to be done to have an impact. And so SWS has been trying to become more international for probably 2 decades now, actively, and it's in the policy. It is one of the missions that we have. It is necessary also because of the change in demography. A lot of people that consider themselves wetland scientists are retiring, and we're not getting enough young people in. So if we want to continue, we need to go where the members are. There are several people also involved with the PWS, the Professional Wetland Scientist Certifications, that go out of their way to attract people, and you're among those as well. What it takes is going to the countries. And I think one thing that SWS could do better is to have what they call international annual meetings more often even than they do now. The rule is that we have an international meeting outside the US every 4 years. I think it should be more often, maybe every other year. And that really advertises the society, and that can easily be done. That's where they have been lacking, is to really go out and support other members also, to say, go to Mexico or to Brazil or wherever, and actually visit there and promote the society and talk about what is needed. And because until you go there, for instance, there may be a wetland scientist society there. And we know there are some. There's one in South Africa, for instance. There's one in Taiwan. There's certainly a big one also in China. And so why would members, or why would researchers, why would colleagues in these other countries, why would they become a member of the Society of Wetland Scientists instead of going to their own national society, right? And there too, the society is doing the right thing by creating active collaboration and MOUs with those societies. But we need more of that.
Great. Yeah, and that connects really well with the recent activity that you are planning together with the international chapter,
Right.
and the Wetlands Journal that's doing a kind of itinerant SWS event through South America. Could you tell us a little bit about this activity and why you become interested and to become a part of it?
Well, first of all, that is to do with our collaboration, of course. And that really started with me being awarded a Fulbright Specialist Award. This is funded through the Fulbright program, which is out of the Federal Department of State. And they support different types of Fulbright scholars. The specialist program is for people that are recognized leaders in their field that may be able to help with developing research, teaching, outreach, and forge collaboration in other countries. And so that is how you and I, of course, got together to think about our project that's currently happening, ongoing very successfully in Mexico. And through that, I learned more than maybe you also know about the culture of Mexico, but also the rest of Latin America, through discussions, through working with you, doing online workshops with people from Colombia and Peru particularly. That has been a great experience, still is a great experience. And it's also the stage in my career that makes it possible for me to worry less about how many publications I produce every year, and more do things I'm passionate about, which is generally supporting ideas for helping our environment, and then more specifically water and wetlands.
It's a way to come back for the society or the community.
Give back, yeah, absolutely, yeah, it is, yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be giving back to the American society or the Netherlands where I grew up. It's trying to be more global in that thinking, and the problems we see are the same everywhere, unfortunately, yeah.
You have received a lot of recognitions and awards along your professional career, but most recently you received a really remarkable award in environmental science. And could you fancy yourself a little bit about it and tell us about what is this award, and how do you feel to being recognized in that way?
You mean the Fulbright Award, or
no,
the listing in the top? Yeah, that was kind of interesting. There is a group, and I'm trying to remember which university it was. I'm going to say it was Stanford, but I'm not exactly sure. And they rank scientists differently from how we tend to do it, which is looking at how many publications somebody has, and what the impact factors are of the journals they publish in. And an email came to NDSU to say that I was listed as being in the top 10% of scientists in the field of environmental science. And it's just the recognition. There's nothing, there's no prize or anything with it. But I never thought about myself that way, and it just goes to show, that there are a lot of people out there like me that do research, and they're not necessarily immediately known by everybody in the field, but they produce excellent work, and then it really depends on how you measure a person's impact on their field. And their way, for instance, listed also a mathematician in our university. And like, mathematicians don't get hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in funding support. And so he too was recognized in there. And it led to me meeting with people in the upper administration in the university to talk a bit about the fact that people who do the kind of work we do, also environmental science, compared to, let's say, the medical sciences, and how you don't have to necessarily bring in millions of dollars to make an impact in your own field. And it started more discussion at this university, and I hope so also in other institutions, about how we appreciate people and how we award people through the institutions. So that was really cool. It was a great honor, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you think that this recognition had an impact in your life and at your university or
Yes.
your career?
Yes, it did. Because the university suddenly had to look at what I do maybe through a different lens, and they have been much more supportive since. For instance, if I see something that NDSU should maybe support, like the premiere of our documentary in 2 days from now, they are more likely now to say, yeah, Marinus is doing pretty well, and he is also advertising the university, and so we should support that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, because you talked, you mentioned the documentary that could be nice if you talk for our audience a little bit about the Fulbright project that you had
Right.
in Mexico and some of the outcomes, like the documentary.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
had.
Yeah. Yeah, so one thing you could do after this interview maybe, or during, maybe you could put in the link to our website for the project. But so I got this money to collaborate with groups. The Fulbright Specialist Program, you can take on 2 projects that need to be 2 years apart. And so the first one is working with you. And we went to the Sierra Gorda where the project was to be held. It is about water quality and water availability in a place where, like many other places in the world, there are the people that have water and the people that don't, and people that have stories. And you and I started talking about how we could record these stories that people have. And I give you credit for then turning it into it not just being recorded in audio, but also visually. And that led to the production of our documentary, which in English is called Water Talks, Perceptions from the Sierra Gorda. And we became accidental filmmakers, which I was told last night I shouldn't say that to filmmakers, but we are. We made a movie that is an hour long, where there are all these people talking about water and how it has changed, how they can't swim in it anymore, how the fish have disappeared, and all that. And that story, of course, is not specific to Mexico. It applies in so many other places in the world. And so I think it's a great honor for you and me both that we have this now featured in the North Dakota Human Rights and Arts Film Festival. North Dakota Human Rights Film and Arts Festival. Anyway, that now happens every year in Fargo, and it attracts quite an audience. There are people, as you know, that come from other countries and from every corner of the United States, and it's almost a week long, and so it's very exciting. And after Saturday, of course, we're going to put that film also on our website, and then anybody listening to this should be able to find it on the internet. So.
And how do you expect that experiences and the learning lessons from the mountains in central Mexico can contribute for the prayer in North Dakota?
Well, the problems that they have. So in the Sierra Gorda, it rains for about 2 months. The people on top of the mountains, and they're steep mountains, they see the water fall and then it disappears. And they are developing ways and have been developing ways to capture that water. But they get their drinking water and what other purposes, washing, they get that water from the rain. There are no permanent bodies of water at those altitudes, which is about 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet. The people in the valley, they get that water, it is captured and it comes through their homes, through their taps, and they use it and flush it down the toilet. That is no different from North Dakota. In North Dakota, there is a serious lack of water, and a lot of people are not aware of this. There, across the whole of North Dakota, less water falls in precipitation than evaporates off the land or is transpired through the vegetation. So the net balance is loss of water in North Dakota, and has been for a very long time. Which means that all these activities that we have, people living in cities, but also agriculture, big industries, oil, they all need water. And the water therefore has to come either from the aquifers, which are being depleted, or it is imported from other states and comes down the Missouri River, essentially, from Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. And people are not aware of it typically, but it's the same problem as what happens in the Sierra Gorda. The people that have water, if you happen to be a farmer and you sit on top of an aquifer that hasn't been depleted yet, for your lifetime at least, maybe you have water. But that is being used up, and that story is the same everywhere. I think our project in the Sierra Gorda, where it was most successful, was at least to get these people that had never talked to each other, to get them to talk about these issues. And hopefully it leads to change. I don't know if it will. It's often politics gets involved. Which is why you and I need to go back and talk with people again. But that has to happen everywhere. Here in North Dakota, the people that farm, the people that run the oil extraction businesses and other extractive industry and big industries, as well as the cities, but also the people who just go fishing in the rivers and the lakes, they all need to sit together and talk about what they think is a problem and how it can be solved, and find solutions, because it cannot continue this way.
Particularly right here in North Dakota, that we are now this week for the premiere, that there are very special wetlands in the state, and
That's
they
right.
are very endangered, and some of them very degraded about the landscaping change in the past decades or centuries. Could you tell us a little bit about the wetlands here, the prairie potholes, and your experiences then like a citizen in this part of the world, but also like a scientist doing research in these wetlands?
Yeah, when I moved here, I realized first of all that this was an outstanding place for wetlands research, particularly because of the prairie pothole region. There are estimated to be close to 1 million or so prairie pothole wetlands just in North Dakota. The prairie pothole region stretches from as far south as Iowa up into northern Canada, and they are all glacial potholes. They're depressions in the landscape that some are connected, some are not. Often they behave like closed watersheds. And I realized when I came here to start with that gives you an opportunity to compare wetlands in different categories, which is really difficult to do in other places. So for instance, we did some work on wetlands that are perceived to be of good quality. They haven't been plowed, they have minimum grazing in them maybe, but they are, for all intents and purposes, unimpacted mostly by human activities. But there are others that are plowed through almost every year and that are therefore, from an ecological perspective, of very low quality. They're incorporated in agricultural landscapes. And as an aside, I understand why farmers would do that, because as many of them have told me, during dry periods, that's the only place where they can still grow a crop, and there are serious droughts in this part of the world. So, but it means that there are wetlands that of which there are many that have different levels of disturbance. And there are so many that you can say, and not only do I want to find wetlands that are almost intact and others almost entirely disturbed and some in between, but you can also say, well, not only that, I want them also to be in a particular size. And I dismiss the really small ones and I dismiss the really big ones. I just want the ones in between. And you can find enough that you have replication within those categories. So now you can look at differences between these and statistically analyze that. That makes the prairie pothole region interesting from a scientific perspective. The prairie pothole region is always called the duck factory of North America. This is because 80% of certain duck species nest here in the summer, and then they'll go on vacation in Mexico and other places, but in the summer they're here. Minnesota has prairie pothole-like wetlands. Some of them are shallow lakes that are permanently wet but connected to rivers and streams. The problems you see here is, first of all, is that agriculture, and I'm not blaming farmers, it's us, right? We need agriculture to eat, and agriculture has disturbed a lot of wetlands, and even under no net loss, as it's called, the idea that if a wetland is destroyed on purpose or accidentally, it needs to be compensated for somewhere else. Despite that, and this was from the 1980s, despite that, we have still lost more wetlands, and on top of that, climate change is happening, and it is not simply a matter of the prairie pothole region shifting over left, east or west, depending on how the climate changes. Because if you go further east and south, in Iowa, probably 95% of all the wetlands have been destroyed. So they're no longer there. You go west, excuse me, you go west, there are still a lot of prairie potholes, but they are relatively dry, and so the prediction is that they will dry up further. So that's one of the threats that we have in this area in terms of wetlands. And we're losing all the ecosystem services that they provide, right? Flooding and droughts, so hydraulic buffering, I should call it, and all those other functions, habitat for birds, cleaning our water, all those functions are less, those services. Yeah.
Do you have any particularly special wetland that's your favorite, or a place that you have really good memories, or a moment, or I don't know, just a very beautiful wetland that you visited?
Anywhere in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, partly because my PhD research was in the Netherlands, was on salt marshes, coastal salt marshes. There isn't any one specific salt marsh that is my favorite place. But every time I go back and smell the salt marsh, and they smell like dimethyl sulfide, which is that kind of fishy smell. I love it. It is like an addiction, you know. And so that is one thing that I really like. But more recently here, and you've seen some of that too, there are fens around here that are quite rare and are hard to get to, but when you're in them, they are among the most beautiful places you can find, with insectivorous plants in them and mosses, and they are really beautiful. Other favorite wetlands, well, actually in China I saw a wetland park. So it's a restored wetland in the south of China, and I was shown around there a number of years ago, and it was just a beautiful place. I could also see where they didn't quite restore it the way I would have. I remember asking, there are no snakes here. Any good wetland, certainly in the tropics and that's subtropical, should have snakes in it. And they said, well, there are no snakes here. I said, well, there should be. And I remember that whole discussion. And kind of suggesting that maybe they ate all the snakes. Excuse me. But they made the point that the people are so used to not seeing snakes, and are, you know, have learned wrongly that all snakes are bad, that even if they would bring some back they would kill them all. But that was a very interesting place to see, and particularly how they had restored it and developed ecotourism for the local Yi people. That was an outstanding place. Yeah. Oh, and then I should also mention Uganda. That was special because that was my first time to Central Africa, or East Africa, I should say, and to be on a wetland, in a wetland with in a boat, where for the first time I saw hippopotamus in the wild and crocodiles, and the two go together. I never knew that they don't bother each other so much, but they benefit from each other. That was very cool as well. So
Great.
Yeah.
And what research projects are you currently working on?
Well, the most current project, I have a PhD student, and he is working on a project that's funded by EPA to try to answer the question, if you were to create new wetlands or restore wetlands or both, with a view to improve an entire watershed, then how much wetland would you need? There's always this question, how efficient are wetlands at removing pollutants and sediments? And the pollutants we're looking at are plant nutrients, basically nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediments is another issue. And I think we are pretty certain that wetlands are generally very good at removing pollutants, particularly nitrogen, less so phosphorus, but really good. And sediments, we know that. But now, how big should a wetland be to clean up a watershed downstream? In North Dakota specifically, the way we are addressing that is that there are small watersheds, which is good, maybe a few hundred kilometers squared, so you can travel around them and do measurements. And they are listed as impaired waters, is what it is called. All of them are basically, they drain into a reservoir. Of course, reservoirs always fill up with sediments and nutrients, and we know this. And that's where we focus on. It's like, if we were to at least stop the loading into these reservoirs. I mean, what's already in there is in there. You can try to take it out. But if you want to stop that loading with nutrients and sediments, could you do that by building more wetlands in those watersheds? It's mostly theoretical. It's based on the literature that's already out there, and then we're using modeling approaches because actually measuring that on a watershed scale is near impossible. But we collaborate with hydrologists here on campus, and we're in the middle of it. We are starting to get an idea of how to do it. That's about how far we got, but that's that project. And then, of course, not so much research, but my collaboration with you also in Mexico is continuing. So those are the two big things that I have happening at the moment. Yeah.
Cool. And also the books that you are publishing.
Well, that is correct. Yes. So there's a book soon to come out about our projects in Sierra Gorda, of course, and then a book on using wetlands for phytoremediation in the tropics. That has been accepted for publication, so we're anxiously awaiting that to be published. It's all very good and a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a very exciting project.
I agree. Yeah.
Do you have any project that you dream like to do it, but you have never found the money or funding or time or a good opportunity to do, but that is your dream life research project?
Yes. If you go to Bill Mitch's book, and I've talked with Bill about this over the years, the very first chapter starts with this statement that wetlands are found on every continent in the world except Antarctica. And I take issue with that because I know for a fact that there are wetlands. And if we say that there are not, then they'll never be protected, right? So my dream projects that would cost a lot of money, but would be to do a survey of wetlands in Antarctica and to describe them. And of course, it's a big continent, traveling around is not easy. But I know, for instance, of one paper by Chinese colleagues from the 1990s, I think, that describes two what they call salt marshes. On the other side, relative to the peninsula, I never know whether it's east or west or south because it's Antarctica, but kind of opposite from the peninsula, there is an abandoned Chinese research station, and that's where at the time they did their work. And it describes how there's a grass species growing there, and otherwise there are short things like mosses and what have you, but it certainly is a wetland, and there have to be more, particularly also on the peninsula. So if anybody wants to give me money, I'll go do it, right?
Sounds very exciting and a very interesting expedition to coming up. You are going to finish our interview with a question, and if you would like to leave any message for future generations of wetland scientists.
Yes. Wetlands are intrinsically connected with water. They are, by many measures, the most important ecosystems in the world. There's no doubt about that. Yes, the rainforest is important, but it doesn't clean water for us, other than water that falls on it and through the soil, but it's not like our river water is just dependent on those forests. It's actually the wetlands along those big rivers that are part of these ecosystems that clean the water for us, be it a huge river like the Amazon or small ones all around the world, like even the Red River here that goes through Fargo. We need to urgently protect those wetlands specifically, not indirectly, not through a Clean Water Act like it is in the United States, not through just putting them into national parks. Each country should have a law that protects wetlands where it is very clear that we can no longer destroy them, impact on them. And human society is complicated, and we will always impact one way or another. But one thing that has really recently dawned on me is that there is not one wetland left in the world anywhere. And you can say that of any ecosystem, any biome. There is not one left anywhere in the world that is not impacted by humans, because climate change, us polluting the atmosphere with gases, nitrous oxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur oxides. These are gases, carbon dioxide, of course. These are gases that travel around the world, and it means that all the waters around the world anywhere are exposed to higher levels of these substances. So there is not one left that is not unimpacted. And we need to really start seriously thinking about how to limit further damage. If we don't, it doesn't look good for humanity. So I think that is the biggest message, is that if we start with wetlands and protect them as wetlands, be it in the Netherlands or in Zimbabwe or in Uruguay, they all should do that.
Anyway, thank you very much, Marinus. I really appreciated your contribution for the wetlands interview. It was really nice to learning a little bit more about your life experience on wetlands and your ideas, and everyone about wetlands that you have contribute not only for the journal or for the Society of Wetland Scientists, but for the community in general, protecting wetlands and the water. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana. Pleasure.
Anyway, we invited everyone to see the another interviews that you have in the series that is in the SWS YouTube channel, and also we invited everyone to contribute for the activities that you have been developed in the international chapter. And see you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you so much.